Spider-Man woke to a sky painted the wrong shade of gray, and the silence hit him before the cold did. Times Square stretched around him like a graveyard of neon and glass, the massive screens flickering with static, their glow weak and dying. His hands moved instinctively toward his wrists, but his web shooters were gone. In their place, cold metal restraints bit into his skin, stamped with a logo he knew too well. The people who passed kept their distance, eyes filled not with hope or admiration but with raw, animal fear. Above the shattered skyline, a hologram crackled to life, towering over the ruins like a god demanding worship. The words burned green against the haze. All hail the Goblin regime. Peter's blood turned to ice in his veins. The villain he had spent years fighting, the monster he had stopped 100 times, had won. His friends were nowhere. The Avengers tower stood in the distance as nothing more than a blackened skeleton wrapped in victory banners. And then a voice slithered through the smoke behind him, cold and dripping with triumph. "Welcome to the world where you failed, Peter." He hit the ground hard enough to drive the air from his lungs, asphalt tearing at his palms as he caught himself. Sirens screamed somewhere in the distance, but they sounded wrong, muffled, like the city itself was choking on its own decay. The sky hung low and gray, even though morning light should have been breaking through, thick smoke rolling between the towers like the breath of something dying. Peter pushed himself upright, dizzy and disoriented, and the first thing he truly noticed was the absence beneath the chaos. No laughter echoing from sidewalks, no horns blaring in traffic, no crowds rushing to wherever crowds rushed. New York had forgotten how to live, and the silence was deafening. He staggered forward, crossing an intersection littered with debris and abandoned vehicles. A massive holoscreen mounted on a crumbling building flickered overhead, cycling through the same message on an endless loop. The voice was calm, measured, and unmistakably familiar. Order is stability. Chaos died with the Avengers. Peter froze mid-step. Norman Osborn. That voice had haunted his nightmares for years, but never like this. Never victorious. He spun toward the skyline, searching for landmarks, searching for anything familiar. Where Stark Tower once stood proud and gleaming, there was now only a charred husk wrapped in green banners bearing a jagged, mocking smile. Patrol gliders cut through the smoky air above, their wings shaped like diseased bats, each carrying armored soldiers with visors that glowed toxic green. Goblin troopers. Not a handful of hired muscle. An army. Peter ducked behind an overturned bus as one of the gliders descended, its scanning beams slicing methodically across the pavement. His heart hammered against his ribs. His web shooters were gone. His suit was gone. Even the familiar weight of his phone in his pocket had vanished. But something new pressed against his throat, cold and heavy. His fingers found metal, a collar embedded with sharp prongs that sent a warning jolt through his fingertips the moment he touched them. A suppressor. Someone had stripped him of everything and wanted to make sure he stayed powerless. He forced himself to breathe slowly, fighting the panic clawing at his chest. Everything felt wrong, tilted, like reality itself had shifted while he slept. The street signs bore names he didn't recognize. The buildings were plastered with propaganda. The few people who moved through the shadows did so with their heads bowed, flinching every time a patrol glider passed overhead. Peter whispered the question to himself, barely audible. What happened here? A digital billboard crackled and switched feeds, headlines scrolling too fast to process until one phrase burned itself into his vision. Spider-Man public execution 2 years ago. His stomach dropped through the pavement. They killed Spider-Man. They killed him. Or at least, they killed the version of him that belonged to this nightmare. Fear shot through him like lightning. If this world had already watched him die, then seeing him alive now would shatter everything. And Norman Osborn, the man who had apparently conquered an entire city, would tear reality apart brick by brick to find him and finish what he started. A rumble shook the ground beneath his feet. A convoy of armored trucks screeched around the corner, engines roaring like predators on the hunt. Their doors were marked with a symbol Peter recognized from his darkest memories, a twisting green G carved like a scar into metal. At the center of the convoy rolled a massive prison transport, sealed and reinforced, guarded like it carried the last secret left in the world. Troopers barked orders. Pedestrians scattered like roaches fleeing light. Peter tried to slip into an alley, tried to disappear into the shadows, but a hand closed around his wrist and yanked him back. A girl stepped out of the darkness, hood pulled low over her face, hair tangled and wild, eyes sharp with a kind of fire that only burned in people who had nothing left to lose. "If you want to stay alive," she hissed, "do not move." Peter swallowed hard. "Who are you?" Peter forced the question past the tightness in his throat. "How did the Goblin take control?" Riley crossed her arms, jaw tight. Your other self almost stopped him. He discovered a device Norman had been building in secret, something that could rewrite neural pathways on a massive scale. Brainwash entire populations with a single signal. Your Peter destroyed half of it before Norman caught him. The cybernetic man continued, his voice heavy with grief. After Spider-Man fell, Norman replaced everyone. Every leader, every official, every hero who dared resist. The Avengers held out longest, but he hunted them down one by one. Once the heroes were gone, the people had no one left to believe in. They surrendered because surrendering was all they had left. Peter's chest constricted. This was not just a darker version of his world. This was a world where losing once had destroyed everything. Before he could respond, alarms shrieked through the bunker. Red lights flashed. Resistance spiders grabbed weapons and scrambled into defensive positions. Riley sprinted to a console, her face draining of color as she read the data streaming across the screen. "They found us." A massive explosion rocked the ground. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. Peter felt the shockwave ripple through his bones, rattling his teeth. Another blast followed, closer this time, and screams filled the narrow space as the walls began to crack. A hologram flared to life above the central table, green and glitching and monstrous. Norman Osborn's face materialized in the flickering light, twisted into a smile that looked carved rather than formed. "Did you really believe you could hide from me?" His voice slithered through the bunker like poison. "I know that face. I know that failure." Another Spider-Man. How delightfully amusing. The hologram vanished. The bunker went deathly silent. Riley grabbed Peter's arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to bruise.
"He knows about you now."
"That means this location is compromised. We have minutes before this whole place becomes a tomb." The explosions grew louder, closer, the ceiling cracking wider with each impact. Fires erupted in the corridor behind them. People shouted orders over the chaos, trying to organize an evacuation that was already falling apart. Peter felt something stir inside him, an instinct he thought had been buried the moment his powers vanished. He scanned the room desperately and spotted a metal locker that had been blown open by the shockwave. Inside lay something scorched and torn but unmistakable in its shape. A Spider-Man suit, blackened by fire, stained with old blood, but still holding the silhouette of a hero who had refused to surrender. Riley shoved it into his hands, her eyes fierce and desperate. "Your Peter was wearing this when he died," she said. "If you are going to survive this world, you might have to become what he was." Another explosion ripped through the bunker, collapsing the far wall in a cascade of rubble and flame. Peter clutched the suit against his chest. He was not ready for this. But this world did not care about ready. Smoke devoured the bunker as it tore itself apart, flames crawling across the shattered floor like living things hunting for prey. Peter sprinted through the collapsing tunnel with Riley at his side, the burned Spider-Man suit clutched against his chest like a lifeline. An explosion behind them sent a shockwave that lifted them both off their feet and threw them forward. Peter rolled across the debris, coughing, ears ringing, the world reduced to smoke and chaos. Riley grabbed his arm and hauled him upright before he could catch his breath. "Secondary exit," she shouted, her voice barely cutting through the roar of destruction.
"We have to reach it now."
The tunnel ceiling cracked above them, metal beams screaming as they gave way and crashed down in a deadly rain. The resistance base, this timeline's final desperate hope, was dying around them. Peter yanked Riley aside just as a chunk of concrete obliterated the ground where she had been standing a heartbeat before. They burst into a narrow corridor lined with ancient generators, emergency lights flickering like dying heartbeats, sparks raining down like burning snow. Then a glider engine screamed. A Goblin trooper exploded through the wall ahead, landing in a crouch that cracked the floor beneath his boots. His green visor scanned the corridor and locked onto Peter instantly. Unauthorized entity detected.
Spider-Man.
Peter cursed under his breath. No webs. No enhanced strength. No spider sense warning him of danger. Just a ruined suit pressed against his chest and a heartbeat that refused to slow down. Riley fired first, her blast catching the trooper square in the chest. But the armor absorbed most of the impact, barely staggering him. He charged forward, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Peter reacted on pure instinct, ducking low, pulling Riley out of the trooper's path, grabbing a loose metal pipe from the debris. The trooper swung a blade that hummed with energy. Peter blocked it with the pipe, sparks exploding inches from his face, the impact numbing his arms all the way to his shoulders. The trooper swung again, faster this time, but Peter slipped behind him and drove the pipe into the control panel mounted on the glider's side. The machine sputtered, sparked, and detonated in a burst of green flame that swallowed the trooper whole. Riley stared at him through the smoke, breathing hard. For someone without powers, you fight like you still have them. Peter did not answer. He did not want to admit how much he missed the weightless reflexes, the clarity of the danger sense that was no longer firing in his skull. All he had left was instinct honed over years of battle. And instinct alone would not beat an entire army. They reached the end of the corridor. Riley slammed her palm against a rusted metal plate, and doors groaned open to reveal a maintenance tunnel leading up toward the street. Wind poured through carrying smoke and sirens and screams. The sounds of a war that had already been lost. Peter climbed out and saw the world collapsing around him. The Goblin warship hovered above the ruins of the bunker, like a mechanical god of destruction. Its cannons glowed with emerald fire, blasting craters into the city streets with methodical precision. Troopers descended from its belly like a plague, rounding up civilians, dragging them toward waiting transports. The ground shook as massive mech stomped through the rubble, their footsteps thundering like the heartbeat of a monster. Norman Osborn's voice boomed from every speaker in the city, inescapable and absolute. People of New York, today marks the purge of the old world. Resistance ends now. Riley grabbed Peter's hand. We are completely exposed. Move. They sprinted into a side alley, dodging falling debris and scanning beams. Peter's lungs burned with every breath. He clutched the charred suit, feeling the fabric pull at his fingers like it was trying to tell him something. This was not just a costume. It was a promise made by the Spider-Man who had died fighting this nightmare. But Peter was not that Spider-Man. He was not sure he could ever be. They hit a dead end. A wall too high to scale without powers, too solid to break through. Patrol lights swept the alley behind them. Footsteps closed in from multiple directions. Riley swore under her breath.
Trapped.
Peter turned to face the approaching lights, adrenaline slamming through his veins so hard he could taste copper on his tongue. Put on the suit, Riley said, desperation cracking her voice. Maybe it will help you become him. Peter shook his head. This suit does not give powers. It is just fabric. No, she said, stepping closer, her eyes fierce and certain. But maybe it gives courage. And right now, courage is all you have left.
Down.
Peter dropped into the darkness first, landing painfully in shallow water that stank of rust and decay. Riley followed a second later, sealing the grate behind them just as boots clashed on the metal above. They plunged into the underground maze, wading through grimy tunnels that twisted and branched in every direction. Peter's breath echoed off the concrete walls, each inhale sharp and desperate inside the mask. Riley led with the confidence of someone who had memorized every inch of this subterranean labyrinth. Peter stumbled behind her, muscles burning, lungs aching, exhaustion dragging at his limbs like chains. But the suit kept moving. Every tear in the fabric felt like a whisper from the Spider-Man who had fought here before him. Every bloodstain was a reminder that someone had believed this symbol was worth dying for. After countless turns, the sounds of pursuit finally faded into silence. Riley stopped at last, leaning against the tunnel wall, chest heaving. "That was insane," she breathed. "You actually charged an armed squad without any powers." Peter pulled off the mask, sweat streaming down his face. "I did not have a choice." "You always have a choice," she said softly, something shifting in her expression. "And you chose to run toward the danger instead of away from it. That is why our Spider-Man mattered to people." Peter sat beside her in the darkness, letting the cold air settle around them like a temporary truce with the nightmare above. For a moment, the tunnel felt almost still, almost safe. But they both knew safety was an illusion that would not last. Riley wiped grime from her forehead, her voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. "Norman wants you alive. Not for execution. Not for a public display. For something much worse." Peter frowned. "What could be worse than killing me?" She nodded slowly, fear flickering in her eyes. "He wants to use you." Peter's heart stuttered. Riley continued, her voice cracking under the weight of what she was saying. "He believes that if he captures you, he can rebuild his mind control device using your neural patterns. And once it is complete, he will not stop at this world. He will spread his control to every universe that has ever existed." Peter felt the cold seep deeper into his bones. Norman Osborn did not just want to rule this broken timeline. He wanted to conquer every version of reality that had ever dared to exist. Peter's blood ran cold at Riley's words, the tunnel suddenly feeling smaller, darker, the walls pressing in like they wanted to crush him. Norman Osborn was not simply hunting a fugitive. He was hunting the very concept of Spider-Man, the symbol that had defied him across countless realities. If he captured Peter, he would not just rewrite this timeline. He would spread his corruption like a plague through every world that had ever existed, exterminating hope wherever it tried to take root. Riley pushed herself upright, urgency sharpening her features. "We cannot stay underground. He will sweep these tunnels eventually, and we'll be trapped like rats. There is one place left we can go. One place nobody enters unless they have nothing left to lose." Peter rose slowly to his feet. "Where?" She hesitated, then whispered the words like they were a curse. "The ruins of Oscorp Tower." Peter's stomach twisted. That building had been dangerous even in his world, even when it was standing and operational and filled with security. In this nightmare reality, half of it had collapsed while the other half had been twisted into a fortress of horrors by the Goblin regime. But Riley was already moving, splashing through the tunnel water with the determined stride of someone who had made peace with whatever waited ahead. Peter followed. They climbed a rusted maintenance ladder and emerged onto a dead street in the shadow of the tower. The structure loomed above them like a wound carved into the skyline, split open and bleeding green fire from its heart. Windows gaped like empty eye sockets. Smoke leaked from cracks in the facade. The top floors had been scorched into a jagged crown that clawed at the poison sky. Riley kept her voice barely above a breath. "Your Peter hid something here before he died. Something he believed could destroy Norman's device permanently." Peter stared up at the monstrous building. "A way to end this nightmare." "No," Riley said, her eyes hard. "A way to end him." They slipped through the debris-choked lobby, picking their way past fallen columns and shattered glass. Dust filled Peter's lungs with every breath. Propaganda posters that had once covered the walls now lay cracked and torn across the floor. The tower groaned around them, a sound like metal bones grinding against each other, like the building itself was alive and suffering. They reached an elevator shaft where the cables hung snapped and useless, the car crushed at the bottom under tons of rubble. Riley clipped onto a rope anchored somewhere above and tossed another to Peter. "You climb," she said. "I will watch our backs." Halfway up the shaft, the entire tower trembled. Peter clung to the rope as plaster, and debris rained down around him. Somewhere above, explosions shook the structure. He heard the unmistakable whine of glider engines. "They found us again." Riley shouted from below. Peter climbed faster, muscles screaming in protest. When he reached the 34th floor, he hauled himself onto a ledge and helped Riley up after him. What greeted them was a vision of horror. A laboratory filled with shattered containment pods and broken machinery and remnants of experiments twisted beyond any sane recognition. At the center of the devastated lab sat a small cylinder that pulsed with soft light. Riley's eyes went wide with desperate hope. That is it. The neural disruptor core. Your Peter stole it from Osborn before he died. He hid it here, knowing Norman would never think to look in his own tower. Peter approached the device, feeling warmth radiating from its surface. What does it do? It cancels out the mind control signal completely. Without it, Norman cannot dominate the population. He cannot expand to other worlds. He becomes nothing more than a tyrant without an army, a monster without teeth. Before Peter could respond, the floor exploded inward. A glider burst through the reinforced wall in a storm of shrapnel and flame. Peter threw himself over Riley, shielding her as fire engulfed the far side of the laboratory. And descending through the smoke on mechanical wings that crackled with damaged circuitry came the nightmare himself. Norman Osborn. Half armor and half monster, his face stretched into a grin too wide to be human, eyes burning with madness that had long ago consumed whatever sanity once lived there. Another Spider-Man, Norman hissed, his voice echoing through the ruined lab. Do you have any idea how long I have waited for this moment? Peter stepped forward despite the tremor threatening to collapse his legs. You lost your world the day you decided fear was stronger than hope. You will lose mine, and every other reality you try to infect. Norman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I already won, boy. You are simply here to help me complete my victory. He lunged. Peter dove aside, grabbing a shattered lab panel and swinging it into Norman's helmet with every ounce of strength he possessed. Sparks exploded on impact. Norman barely staggered, then swung a massive armored claw that caught Peter across the chest and sent him crashing through a ruined examination table. Pain screamed through his ribs as he hit the ground. Riley opened fire, energy blasts striking Norman's armor. He swatted her aside like she weighed nothing, sending her skidding across the floor. Peter crawled toward the disruptor core, every inch agony, blood dripping from his split lip. Norman's boots slammed down inches from his reaching fingers. I killed your other self, Norman growled, looming above him like death incarnate. You? You will live just long enough to watch every universe fall. Peter looked up through the torn mask, blood on his teeth, and smiled. You forgot one thing. He grabbed the core, slammed it directly into the exposed circuitry of Norman's chest plate, and twisted with everything he had left. Blinding white light erupted through the laboratory. Norman screamed, louder and more terrible than any sound Peter had ever heard, his armor shorting and sparking, circuits bursting in cascading failures, mechanical wings folding and crumpling inward as the control signal in his body collapsed into static. The explosion threw Peter across the room like a rag doll. When the smoke began to clear, Norman Osborn lay motionless on the scorched floor, his armor dark and dead, his empire dying with him. The tower groaned again, deeper this time, the sound of structural integrity finally giving way. Riley limped to Peter's side and hauled him upright, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead. They stumbled toward the emergency stairwell as the laboratory caved in behind them, fire chasing their heels through the collapsing corridors. They burst onto the street just as Oscorp Tower surrendered to gravity, folding in on itself with a thunderous roar that shook the foundations of the city. Dust clouds billowed outward like a tidal wave, swallowing everything in choking gray. Riley looked at Peter, her eyes shining with tears and disbelief, and something that might have been hope. You did it. Our Spider-Man could not finish it, but you actually did it. Peter shook his head slowly, clutching the burned mask in his trembling hands. He gave me the chance. He did the hard work years ago. I just finished what he started. Sirens wailed in the distance, but they did not sound like Goblin sirens anymore. Voices rose through the smoke, not screams. Cheers. The Empire was crumbling, and the people were finally beginning to remember what freedom felt like. Riley stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch the spider symbol on his chest. "What happens to you now?" Peter looked down at the mask, at the burns and the bloodstains, and the legacy woven into every thread. "I find a way home," he said quietly. "But until I do, I will help rebuild what was broken here. This world deserves a second chance." Riley nodded slowly, something like peace settling over her exhausted features. "Then welcome to our world, Spider-Man." And for the first time since Peter had woken under that wrong-colored sky, surrounded by the ashes of everything that should have been, he felt something warm kindle in his chest.
Hope.
Script complete.